What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. We're both festive. You know, I've got a red and green hat on just for the Rose Bowl. You're wearing your red and green hat for Christmas. We're recording this December 23rd. So Merry Christmas, everybody, whenever you're listening to this. But on this episode, we're going to recap our first round college football playoff matchups. We'll talk about there was a lot of discourse over the weekend of what changes need to be made because change is inevitably coming. I don't think anyone likes the result of having two blowouts in first round games. We'll talk about that, kind of the future of the playoff, future of college football. Where do we go from here? And then, of course, we've now got our quarterfinal games and matchups. 4 games. We'll pick them against the spread. So we'll give you our winners, but also picks against the spread. Daniel, we went 3-1 last week. Should have been 4-0. We can talk about that as we get to our first round recap here. But Daniel, Merry Christmas. Happy to have some more football on the horizon. Although it is winding down, we are going to crown a champion here within the next few weeks. So excited to talk about these first round matchups. Daniel, we had the standalone game on Friday of Alabama and Oklahoma. That was a great standalone game. Small thing, I did hear before the game Alabama players talking about the lights in Norman and how they're different and it messed with them last time. And I saw past the excuses, and watching it was really interesting because in Norman, they've only got 4 light poles in the 4 corners, which most stadiums, if you look, most stadiums have lights running the length of the sideline. Like it's more than just 4 places. So the lighting did seem dark, and the lighting is unique there. So there was something I had an eye on that I thought was interesting about the game. The other interesting part was that Oklahoma now becomes the first team in college football to blow 2 17-point leads in the playoff. Bama comes back, wins by 10. Credit to Bama, man. Huge win to come back from. And the surprising thing for me was they flipped the script from the first matchup. We talked about in our pick that Alabama had outgained Oklahoma. Like they had doubled him up in yardage in the first matchup. Just had a crazy turnover game. And Daniel, it was kind of the opposite. Bama won the way that Oklahoma won the first time. Now, post-game win expectancy was way different. Alabama actually had like an 85% post-game win expectancy. But didn't outgain him. Didn't do anything exceptionally well. But had the turnover luck, which I think it is, flipped the other way. And have a 10-point win. And it came back from a 10-point deficit. So a 17-point deficit. A 27-point swing there. Pretty incredible and really impressive win from Alabama on the road.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama, they did what they needed to do in this game. Oklahoma, you mentioned they kind of switched things up. I mean, Oklahoma's kicker, the guy with the short shorts, he missed his first field goal since the first game of the year. So
crazy.
Definitely some things that went, I guess you could say, uncharacteristic for Oklahoma. John Mateer actually looked right, obviously that getting things going. Obviously they were talking about before the game, he had the tape removed from his hand for the first time since that injury. But yeah, that was definitely a game where early on we started to get some texts from people saying, "Oh, hey, y'all picked Alabama," and I was in the sense that I was like, "Oh man, I didn't realize Oklahoma was going to come out and play like this," But very quickly, I mean, within the first half, they came back. So it wasn't even something where you had to count on like a second half or fourth quarter comeback. It was like, oh no, it's even at halftime. And very confidently at halftime, I could say I was looking at it thinking, I mean, we've seen these teams. I know how the game's going to play out. And in no disrespect to Oklahoma, but it's in the pedigree, like the playoff pedigree so far. Alabama is a team that's not going to go away. They've been that way in the playoff era. I'm going to give them credit all the way back to, 2014, 2015 as well. All of those years, even with, Saban versus DeBoer. DeBoer is that way as well, just as a coach, even when he was at, his previous stops. Oklahoma, and I know it's been multiple head coaches, but they're 0 for the playoff. You have to start thinking those things. And if I'm Oklahoma, I would be upset that I got the draw of Alabama, getting a rematch with them for my home game. But it is what it is. You got to win the game. They got up early. I agree with you. This one, I'm glad this was the standalone of the 3. I'm glad this was the Friday night game. Not that any of them are competing with one another because you have each of them by themselves. But I feel like the Friday night just kind of had all eyes on it because there's nothing else going on. So you could kind of settle in, and it was a fun feeling. But yeah, dude, you mentioned we went 3-1. You get to the playoffs, you got to have your best is expected in the playoffs, and we're giving our best. It
Giving
should
our
have been
best.
4-0, but
It should have been
3-3.
4-0.
You can't go 4-0 without going 3-0 first, and that's what we did. And it was very close to being 4-0.
I want to shout out our Pick'em group, which you can still join because ESPN won't let you recreate a bracket. So if you have a bracket and you want to join our ESPN group, there is a link in the bio to join. We got 26 people in there having a good time. I believe, let's see, how many? 12 people, still perfect, including you and I in the first 4 games. So
there you go.
Join us there. Links down below, or you can search the Extra Point on ESPN's bracket, college football playoff bracket challenge. So join us there. Yeah, you and I still perfect. 4-0 straight up. I mean, let's start with the big game first, and we'll get to our loss on the picks. Texas A&M beats Miami. Excuse me, Miami beats Texas A&M 10-3 in a rock fight of a game. I walk away, Daniel. I'll talk about winners first. Really impressed with Miami's defense. Number one, Texas A&M has a big and physical offensive line, big and physical run game, and the way Miami shut that down throughout the game was really impressive. And then on the other side, we knew Miami was supposed to have a very good offensive line, and they looked that way really early in the season, and it looked kind of, in the middle of the season and looked strong again at the end. They showed up. I think Bud Elliott had tweeted in the middle of the game that, if Miami just keeps running it between the tackles, one of these is going to break. Like, they're so close to just breaking one of these. And then they started having these runs pop for 10, 12, 15. Then they had that long one. I forget how long it was toward the end that set up the go-ahead touchdown.
Right.
With Fletcher. And what an unbelievable lead blocker he was on the touchdown as well with Fletcher there. They get the one touchdown they needed to win the game. They go on the road. They hold Texas A&M to 3. Really, really impressive win. This is where Daniel, and this is not just me, it's hard not to be a prisoner of the moment watching these games. We're texting in our group chat, and I'm thinking, like, gosh, can Alabama beat Indiana? Can Miami go and beat Ohio State? And I know their offense didn't look spectacular, but look, 30-mile-an-hour winds and the way their defense played, and we'll get into those games. But hard not to be a prisoner of the moment when you watch a really impressive road win, which did not happen last year in the playoff. All 4 home teams won last year in the first round. So now the first 2 games, the team on the road goes in and wins. I just walked away impressed with Miami despite the lack of offensive production and the way they won. I felt like they played Texas A&M's game and beat them at it, which was on the road with everything on the line. I was impressed by that.
Yeah, and these were the 2 coin flip games. The other 2, obviously they're much more, you're just betting against the spread more or less rather than who's going to win. So this one, though, Jacob, you're absolutely right. Fletcher carries 172 yards. No mathematician, but that's 10 yards a carry. So dude was pounding the rock. And this is, Jacob, this is why we picked Miami. He said they have multiple ways they can win this game. And when you took the pass game away because of all the crazy wins and, the field goals were a toss up, it's like, okay, well, they can exist in this rock fight of a game. They can play defense. They can run the ball. They can play field position, and they can just keep doing it. And then eventually it broke. Now, it feels almost like maybe an Iowa State kind of a game or something where it's like the end of the game, a single touchdown feels like it has iced the game. There's everybody runs 2 minutes. There's a minute 40 left or whatever for Texas A&M to go down, but it felt like this might as well have been 10 seconds left and they're going to be chucking it for the end zone. That's kind of the feeling I had after Miami punched it in finally. But yeah, I agree. I come away impressed with the defense. I think that both teams maybe, I don't want to say they pulled punches, but I think they both kind of understood the game and tried to play a different game. This was played in a dome. I think you see a completely different game than, on campus with the wind and all this kind of, just to create, elements of the game. I still think Miami would have won the other way, but I think you would have seen a higher scoring game. Like, I didn't realize the wind was as bad. My father-in-law leans over before the game kicks off and says, "Hey, what score prediction?" I am not actually a fan of giving score predictions as much as I talk about college football. I
Yeah.
want to just, I don't want to shift my feeling on the game. Like I don't want it to tarnish how I'm feeling while I'm watching the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But right before the game, he said that, so I was like, you know what? What do I think? And the words that came out of my mouth was, I think 27-21 Miami. And then, boy, I was like, and then
Long
as
way from that.
he left my house at halftime, and I said, yeah, we're gonna see it's gonna be a 10-3 game, and I was right on that. I just got to see the first half though, so that's cheating. But yeah, that was some people watch it say it was boring. Yeah, it's boring if you're not living and dying on each play. It's a defensive matchup. It's a field position game. You can see the anguish in the eyes of the fans. And I don't know about you, Jacob, but I know that feeling. And so I'm sitting there watching them watch this game and get fired up for their team, but also just be so nervous. I mean, there's nothing better than on campus college football.
I mean, at that point, see, and I love it because, dude, it feels like every play matters. It's like, man, if one of us scores, so it's like you have
It's
one
like watching
open
an
field
NBA
tackle.
Finals game, and like every possession counts. It's the fourth quarter, and you're just watching every time they bring up the floor. If
Yep.
if it goes out of bounds, it's like the biggest deal ever. It's a turnover, So
The
this
turnover
is
is huge.
huge.
Yeah. So I have one Texas A&M thing to say. Marcel Reed. This is his third year of eligibility. He's eligible to come back next year. Does Texas A&M look for another quarterback? I mean, this is a guy who they said Heisman contender earlier in the year. In their two biggest games, Daniel, he's thrown 5 interceptions, something
Yeah,
like that this year. He threw 2 in this game, no touchdowns, 25 of 39, but for 237, 6.1 yards per attempt. Ran the ball for 1.8 yards per attempt. I mean, at the end, it was just, we texted in our group chat. Our friend Hunter was like, Reed's going to throw a pick on the last drive. And that's exactly what happened. With as many quarterbacks that are available and as good as Texas A&M's team was this year and as high as their expectations are and as much as they're investing into this program, I think they look elsewhere. And I'll say this too, this is bigger conversation, but I was surprised by how low DJ Lagway was rated as far as the quarterbacks that are available in the transfer portal. Don't think he's in the top 8, which is crazy.
yeah.
I think A&M looks at Lagway. I have no sources. I just
Well, he's from Texas, so that's I think he does find his way back. I could see him finding his way back. I would be, and I agree with you, Reed. I think the fact that they had all of last year due to injury, where he was the starter, and then he had
yep.
this year where it was essentially his show, his offense. I say all of last year. He had half of last year where they finally settled on him, and then this year he had the full season. I think you've given him his chance to do it, and in the biggest games he's shown you he can't. I mean, Texas A&M can go get somebody. That's if it was a school that was like, yeah, I just don't know if we're going to be able to attract somebody who's actually better. If there's better guys out there, you're already going to be changing offensive coordinators because Colin Klein's leaving. Why don't you bring a new guy in and just have it be a fresh new offense? If Reed wants to stay and compete, dude, let him stay and compete. He's a good player. And then, if he beats him out, great. But yeah, I think Lagway is a way to go. There's some other guys that are entering the portal that could definitely be an improvement. Tough way for Texas A&M to end their season. Again, the drought continues. Was it 1937 since their national championship? So they're the one everybody's talking about. But Miami marches on, and they get the prize of playing Ohio State.
Get the prize of playing Ohio State. Daniel, 2 more games. Ole Miss beats Tulane 41-10. First score is 45-10. And then Oregon 51-34. They lose the cover, but Daniel, at one point in this game, Oregon had 21 plays and had scored, I think, 34 points. Yeah, because they missed the extra point. I mean, this is where EPA comes in, Daniel, of like what
Right.
EPA have you added? And it's like every time they snap the ball, it was like they're adding. At one point in the game, it was like every time they snap the ball, it's like they're adding 1.25 points to the scoreboard. It was like every time they took a snap.
That's a video game, and that's like if you put the video game on freshman, you can't do that on Heisman.
And you're just running. It looked like they were just running go routes, and he's just like, Hut, wait a second, chuck it, 60-yard touchdown. Oh, okay. let's try that again next drive. Like it was like 18 yards of play at one point. So the fact that we lost that cover,
Yeah,
it's frustrating.
It's infuriating. I'll say this. So as far as that game's concerned, we both kind of called it out. I think you're going to see a big statement from Oregon. This is exactly what you got. We were still right. All of that stuff still, the one field goal and this whole game's different. So as far as our pick being correct or not, I just want to shout out the Twitter for both James Madison and Oregon. This was possibly the most fun I've had as a complete third party, just watching two teams tweet at each other at trash talk leading up to this game. Both of these teams should be very proud of their fan bases. Phenomenal job. I think very classy. And yeah, I think that this was a good, send off for, Oregon and being able to win that game and go to the next round. They were able to do it comfortably. I think you're going to see both them and Ole Miss were able to rest guys because they got up to big leads. That may make a difference because I also obviously Alabama and Miami both actually have maybe the two toughest teams. They got the 1 and 2 seeds that they're playing. So definitely tough matchups in the second round for those teams. But yeah, Oregon, great job. James Madison, I saw a tweet, which I thought was funny. I think I shared it to our group. James Madison, as soon as Oregon's second string and third string guys were in, and they shared the clip of the Get the Gap video from 2019 LSU. I just thought that was hilarious because it's like all of a sudden they weren't dropping any passes. Everybody was open and they were playing loose, but it was too late. They were after the cover, clearly. So
clearly, yeah. That was a frustrating loss. Yeah, both those games were blowouts. I don't have a lot to add. Both those teams did exactly what they should have. The spreads were not big enough. Well, Oregon could have named their score. Oregon could have scored 100 in that game if they wanted to. Clearly took the foot off the gas. Daniel, that sparked a lot of conversation about there's one side saying this is a joke. And look, someone who I followed for a long time and I think is one of the smartest people in the space is Bud Elliott. I think he's very smart. I think he's very intelligent. He's a stat nerd, which I love. He knows ball. He's in recruiting. Like I feel like he knows the sport extremely well.
He's a blue chip ratio guy. He came up with blue chip ratio, and we love that.
He's a ball knower. All right, Bud Elliott's the best. I was annoyed, and fans were annoyed by some of the discourse he's had about just how. I mean, for 2 weeks to talk about how much of a joke this is. I agree. My point was the people that fought for expansion. This was always a part of it. Was G6 inclusion. This was always a part of it. And I had someone say, oh, well, not what, it was like, well, before it was 5 automatic qualifiers. I was like, yeah, that was when, or they were like, oh, there's, there used to be 5 Power 5 conferences and there's your 5 qualifiers. I was like, yeah, the rule was 6 before we only had 4 power conferences. G5 inclusion was always a part of it, which I'm fine with because this is what you asked for. This is what you get. And the reason for it is, look, they're going to get sued if they don't include the group of 5. This is a bigger system issue, which is we have to stop pretending that all of FBS plays the same sport because everyone's comeback is, no, this isn't a different football. They're all FBS. I'm like, yes, exactly. That is the problem. The problem is that we pretend that 136 teams play the same sport. Here's the thing. Bud was right. It is a safety issue. These players in James Madison, like they can practice all they want. Against threes would smoke them. They'd smoke them. Like you cannot replicate that size and speed in practice. You can't. I don't know. To me, Daniel, the biggest thing with the discourse to me is that there's a lot of problems with college football right now, despite the fact that it's probably the most popular it's ever been. So we better get the right people making decisions to fix it quickly before they lose this window of opportunity. I'm glad the sport's popular. Our podcast has grown this year as a result of it. That's fun. I'm glad the sport is popular, that it brings more eyeballs into the sport that we love. What I don't want that to mean is that it changes, that it doesn't look anything like what we love about it. And I think there are bigger changes that need to be made besides the playoff. Do I think the G5 needs their own playoff? Absolutely. I do. I think that is the solution. And I mean, we probably will do a whole podcast episode on what needs to change and our solution and that whole thing. There have been a lot of solutions on social media this weekend, but my biggest take on it, Daniel, is that there are things that need to change, like the college football schedule, before we change the playoff. Yeah. Like And I think that you have to answer the question before we have a conversation about this is what is the purpose of a playoff? I think whenever you answer that question for me, I can then guide our conversation as to like where it needs to go. Because my answer to that question, Daniel, is I think the purpose of a playoff is to crown a national champion. And if that is the case, then again, that's going to inform what I want in a playoff. I want only the
Right.
best teams. James Madison was not one of the best teams in college football this year. And I also think that means that I think 12 is too many. Genie's not going back in the bottle. We're not going less than 12. So I'm not going to
Right.
waste time talking about that. But I don't think there have ever been, and there will never be, 12 teams that are good enough or deserving enough, either or, to compete for a national championship, which is what I think the purpose of a playoff should be at the end of the
Right.
season. If you disagree on what you think what the purpose of a playoff is, then you probably disagree with me about format. That's where I start with before we go anywhere. What's the purpose of the playoff? Is it to crown the best team in the sport, or is it something else? And that's where we probably disagree at the core. I had someone on Twitter say to me, Daniel, like, I think the playoffs are the greatest thing to happen to the sport in my lifetime. I'm like, that's fine. We're just going to have to disagree there because I think the best part of the sport is teams beating their rivals in October and November and September.
And it completely changing the fabric of their season.
Exactly. And the pride you get from that. That's where I'm like, that's fine if you love the playoff. We're just going to have to disagree there. I think the playoff is nice. I love these games. I love that there's big games. I wish they were on campus this weekend. That's an easy change to me is the top 4 seeds should get the benefit of hosting a playoff game. The atmospheres this weekend, all 4 were unbelievable. All 4 teams did an incredible job creating just it's the best thing about the sport of games on campus. To me, a benefit of getting a top 4 seed should be a bye and a home playoff game. I'm like, Daniel, this weekend, imagine Ohio State hosting Miami in the standalone game at night, Buckeye fans, at night. All right, you get a night game with Miami coming into town. Texas Tech hosts Oregon in Lubbock. Amazing. Indiana hosting Alabama. Very cool. With Indiana being the higher seed, we're going to get to the game. Georgia hosting Ole Miss. We've seen this, but, Indiana, Texas Tech, Ohio State, and Georgia hosting playoff games would be amazing. That to me is the easiest change without getting into the changes in the sport that I'd love to see for even next season. But yeah, man, a lot of discourse this weekend. I thought, it's always fun. This is a feature, not a bug of college football, is debating about what should change and rankings, and it gets people talking, which is
it's widely been one of the only subjective sports out there. You've got all the pro sports have their playoff, they've got their professionals, they've got their divisions, and they've got equality in player disbursement for the most part, salary cap or whatever, luxury tax, which isn't really fair in Major League Baseball, but you have a standardization. So that's obviously what's got to be done because all of these, like you said, are not created equal. And honestly, that one of my favorite parts of college football is that like a James Madison could just have like a great season, and then they could just win their conference and go play in a bowl game that we didn't attach the word meaningless to. And we could just say, oh, dude, James Madison went and won Fiesta Bowl, or they won, a bowl. They could be Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. They could go do these fun things, and it means a ton. And it's a great story, and you don't have to look at them with the eyes of, hey, you're a sacrificial lamb for Oregon. Like right now, we all look at James Madison and say, oh, they're trash. They got destroyed by Oregon. Those of us who know ball are not saying that, but like for what they are, they're great, but they're not supposed to be on the field with Oregon, And so let's just call it what it is. Let's if it needs to be a group of 5, a group of 6, whatever playoff, that's great. Whatever. If it needs, the bowl games, that's what I miss, but we'll get there. I think you just gotta, they're still experimenting with everything. I hope that there's been so much change, and this is the last thing I'll say, and we'll move on to the next games. There's been so much change in a short amount of time for those of us who have been college football fans for our whole life, for so long, for 150 years, things didn't change. You had amateurism, you had all these things. And since 2021, there's been so much change so quickly that it's tough to have kind of a North Star of like what's true and what's, the conferences are different. All this stuff's different. It's like what is, the essence of college football? How do we keep that and preserve that for future generations and everything like that? So if I was picking one thing, if you were like, Daniel, you only get one thing to do, I would select a commissioner and have that person have to answer and guide what happens, because I think you could start, but there's no central governing body. And so I think that's probably largest issue right now. But we've teased it. We're going to have that in off-season pod. Don't worry. We'll get to the bottom of it. We'll have all of your favorite, scenarios of what needs to happen. But dude, we got some ball to talk. So let's jump in. Let's go move on to the quarterfinals and get, my appetite's been wet. Let's start eating.
The standalone game on New Year's Eve, we've got Ohio State and Miami in the Cotton Bowl. Yeah, Cotton Bowl here. Daniel, last year, all 4 teams of the first round bye lost. Ohio State was the benefactor of one of those. So the only team in the top 4 now that did this last year, as far as had the layoff and has it again, is Georgia. So curious to see how Ohio State is on the other side of that now. It's different. Miami has some momentum coming off of a win at Texas A&M. They're going back to Texas. Look, in a dome stadium on on field turf. Ohio State opened higher than this, but they are a 9.5-point favorite over Miami. They're the favorite to win the whole thing. Daniel, who do you like to win the Cotton Bowl and advance to the semifinal?
Yeah. So last week, I think we said this was the most confident we had been so far this year. I think that was because of some of the matchups, how they were. This, I think, because I have, stewed over this for a while now, I feel pretty confident. I mean, I think Ohio State wins this game. Obviously, it's spoiler alert, they're one of the best teams in the country. I think that you kind of have, and I don't want to downgrade what we saw from Miami just because they weren't a heavy offensive team. I do think that there's a certain amount of momentum that Miami has from winning that game on the road and feeling good about themselves. But I also think there's enough doubt in their passing game after, just not doing it. Like, compare it to a pitcher in baseball getting the yips and kind of having to like throw strikes and get a guy out. I feel like they walked a lot of guys, but they were able to, get out of that game late. So that's how I feel about Miami. So I don't know if they necessarily carry a ton of momentum. Defensively, I think they do. But this Ohio State team defensively has been a nightmare. But I'll say this, outside of the conference championship game and maybe their first game of the year, this may be the best team Ohio State has played all year, which we're in the playoff. That should happen. So I'm excited to see Ohio State meet this challenge of this great defense, this great pass rush. Does their offensive line have enough? It's a 9.5-point spread. I'm just kind of in on Ohio State on this one. I think they're gonna be well rested. They're gonna run the ball. They're gonna be able to play, defense, and I think they come up with a couple turnovers. Because of that, I think just having that many additional possessions over Miami, I like the double digit win. I think 10 points is kind of right at the number. It's a good line by Vegas. I would probably flex it up to 12 or 14 as far as my personal, like, how I think the game's going to play. But I'm laying 10.5 or laying 9.5. I'll take that point. Laying 9.5 with the Buckeyes. Give me Ohio State.
Daniel, again, this is me. I'm trying not to be a prisoner of the moment with Miami because I walked the game against Texas A&M thinking, if they play defense like that, man, like they can compete with Ohio State. We saw Indiana do it. This is where Daniel, coming into the playoff, and Josh Pate said this too, and I completely agree, was if Ohio State looks vulnerable, there's several teams that can win this whole thing. If they don't, they're probably going to run away with it. And they looked vulnerable and lost. And they hadn't really looked vulnerable all season. And so I'm like, watching them struggle against a team that plays good defense makes me think Miami can stay in this game and that 9.5 is too many points. Regardless, I think Ohio State wins. I think that Miami offensively had 2 buttons they can press. It's running the ball with Fletcher and it's getting the ball to Malachi Toney. They don't really have a threat at receiver outside of Malachi Toney. It's kind of been him or bust in the past game, especially recently, and they fed him a ton in the Texas A&M game. Which version of Carson Beck do we get? Beck looked off in that game, but again, high winds. So he played his best ball in November. Carson Beck did coming in to the playoff. That being said, Daniel, I'm laying 9.5. I think Ohio State has too many ways to win. My only concern with the 9.5 is that I think this will be a low scoring game. These are two very good defenses. I don't know how many points Miami's going to score against Ohio State's defense. I think Ohio State's going to score more. But Daniel, like, I wouldn't be shocked if this were 21-10, like 24-13, 17-7. Like, that would not surprise me if it's that low scoring of a game. But I do think on both defenses are good. Ohio State has several more ways to win on offense. They've got multiple threats at receiver, a really good tight end room, a really good running back room, and a better quarterback. They have more ways to score. I think they score just enough. I do think it's like that 24-14 type of game, low scoring defensive battle, and maybe it's they even break it open late. It's a 17-14 game, and finally a run breaks off, kind of like Miami did to Texas A&M. I think there's just a little bit more points than in that game because Ohio State's offense is much more dynamic and their defense is better. I think there's a reason they're putting 9.5 on this. Give me the Buckeyes to win and cover and to advance to the Fiesta Bowl here in a few weeks. So you and I both on the Buckeyes in this one. All right. We move to, Daniel, the Orange Bowl, Texas Tech and Oregon. This should be a very good game. The lowest point spread of the 4 quarterfinal games, 1.5 is the line, which is interesting for a lot of reasons to me, Daniel. Let's dive into it. I honestly would have thought Oregon would have been a bigger favorite. Texas Tech opened up as the 1.5 point favorite. It has moved to an Oregon 1.5. These are two good football teams, Daniel. This might be the best game of the weekend. Who do you like in the Orange Bowl?
Yeah, I agree. This is one. I mean, I'm just glad to have this matchup. This is two teams that haven't had they don't have any common opponents. There's not, we've seen a lot of rematches. We've seen some teams that we have a really good feel for their style of play. I feel like this is just a fun matchup because you're really going to get to see just two juggernauts go head to head. They both have had, some help with their schedule where maybe at times it was a lull and they were able to kind of not have to expel as much energy. There's been parts where they've had big time matchups. It's a really good barometer also on, Big 10 versus the Big 12 as far as, conference strength, that kind of thing. Because you've got essentially, you could say the class of both conferences. Obviously, there's 3 big time Big 10 teams in this playoff still. So, any one of them. But this matchup in particular, Oregon, just with their pedigree, they've been good for several years now. Dan Lanning has been to this spot. He's been to this spot as a coordinator. He's been to this spot as a head coach. I'm leaning that way. I've looked at this game up and down. I think Texas Tech, one thing that they benefit from, Dickey running the ball, being over 1,000 yards this year, 14 touchdowns. They're more balanced, I guess, statistically speaking, than Oregon. But, that I just like Oregon coming off of this, they had a game, so they were able to, rest up from the championship week, have a game close to this, and then, you really get that game plan out against James Madison early, rest some guys even in that game, so they're not, coming into this one banged up. They didn't have to expel a whole lot of energy. I'm saying a lot of words here. Look, it's a 1.5 point spread. I like Oregon to make the championship game. We talked about that when we went through our bracket. I think they win. It's a 1.5 point spread. I'm going to keep it 100. Let's just see what happens. I like the pedigree on this side. I think Texas Tech, because they just started spending money, they're going to be in this more often. And, I think you'll see they'll be more comfortable next year, perhaps in this spot. I think Oregon wins. I think they win by a touchdown, but 1.5 points, I'll lay that with Oregon. Give me the Ducks.
Daniel, it is hard for me there's 2 teams that are left that it's hard for me to wrap my head around that not just they've won a lot of games, but that they're legitimately good. And if you look at power ratings, just legitimately good football teams. That's Texas Tech and Indiana. We've talked about it a little bit with Indiana, and Texas Tech has definitely got more dues than they used to get, but it's still hard to comprehend it's not hard to comprehend a roster like this winning the Big 12, I'll say. It's
Yeah.
hard for me to get
Yeah.
my head around them contending for a national championship. And, friend of the show, David Cobb, picked Texas Tech to win it all. And whenever we filled out our bracket, I gave it a really good look because I'm like, look, I'm trying to take, my P2 glasses off, my blue chip ratio glasses off, and I'm trying to look at this and be like, okay, Texas Tech is really good. Like, what do you see? And the question I asked him is the question I'll ask here, which is, what is the best defense that Texas Tech has faced all season? And the answer is BYU, and they're barely a top 25 level defense. And Oregon's a top 5 defense in the country. To me, that's the mismatch in this game, Daniel, is I think Texas Tech defense is very good. Now, again, Oregon will be far and away the best offense they faced. But I do think they have a stout defense, especially up front, which is what you need to contend in some of these games, right? Is if you can get pressure on the quarterback and stop the run with your defensive line, your front seven, your linebackers, that'll help your pass game and your corners because Oregon's got a really good receiving room. But on the other side, I wonder if there's going to be some shell shock. I mean, Texas Tech has blown everybody out they've played this year. Whenever you play a team like Oregon that has a top 5 level defense, I don't know that Texas Tech has a dynamic enough offense to contend in this game. And that's where the spread really surprises me. And I still think, as good as power ratings are nowadays, and I know they're opponent adjusted, I still think there's a handicap here of what happens when a team faces a team that they've seen nothing like it all season. Because that's what's going to happen in this game with Texas Tech, where it's not like, Ohio State has seen Indiana, right? They've seen what a top 5 level team looks like. They faced and they lost. It was a close game. They've seen it. So that you can calibrate like, okay, that's what this level of team looks like. Texas Tech has not had that this year. So I think it's hard for me to imagine them walking into a playoff game, seeing this for the first time, and then winning when this is their first time on the stage. Oregon now has playoff experience under their belt. Lay the 1.5. Give me Oregon. I will say, Daniel, though, I don't know if you did this or not. I am looking at these games fresh with new data that we have from the first round. And I'm not just going to it's not necessarily going to stick to my playoff bracket from before. So if you're listening today saying, well, we already have their whole bracket, we are looking at these games fresh. And we're picking against the spread, obviously. So who knows? We might stick to our bracket. We might not. More to come. Let's go to the Rose Bowl. One of my favorite college football games all year. I've made my opinion known that I think we should change the calendar and make the national championship game just be the Rose Bowl, played on January 1st at 4 p.m. every year. I think that should be our championship, New Year's Day, 4 p.m. You don't have to call it the national championship. Just call it the Rose Bowl game, and that's our championship. I've never been, but I have a lot of respect for the Rose Bowl, as do you, Daniel. We were talking about the pretentiousness of it is a feature. I love it because they treat their own game with a lot of respect, right? Like the Masters. Augusta National treats the Masters as if it's the greatest golf tournament in the world, and that it is an honor to host their fans and that their fans get to experience something special. And it is. And they treat it that way, which is what makes it so special. And it makes it better. And then the fans think it's special, and that feeds into, it's a cycle in a good way. The Rose Bowl is this for me. I really want to go at some point, wear my Rose Bowl hat. We get a Big Ten SEC matchup in the Rose Bowl with two teams that wear the same color crimson in Indiana and Alabama. Interesting uniform matchup because it's the same color, it'll just be high contrast, which I didn't even mention uniform matchups. I'm going to come back to that in a second, Daniel.
Yeah.
But this should be a good game. Indiana, a 6.5 point favorite. Daniel, who do you like in the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, I don't know if you've looked this up, Jacob, but do you know how many times Indiana has been to the Rose Bowl?
Oof. Is it once before or never?
They have once before. I thought it was never. Okay. I thought this was their first time, and so I've been saying that, but I just Googled myself to keep myself honest. So this is their second time.
That's smart.
First time was 1967 season, 68 Rose Bowl.
So
the Cardiac Kids is what they called them, which would be a fitting name for Mendoza's, touchdown against Penn State. Felt very Cardiac Kid. How many times would you say Alabama has been to the Rose Bowl? It's obviously not traditional for an SEC team to go to the Rose Bowl, is why I'm asking the question. And obviously, used to traditionally, of course, Big Ten, Pac-10, Pac-12, eventually.
Okay.
How many times
the Rose Bowl venue, or like does a national
have played in the
count?
Rose Bowl game? In the Rose Bowl game, yeah. So
I would get, okay, they've done it twice in the playoff. No, 3 times in the playoff era. 2 or 3. 10. 10 is my guess.
And it's including to this one. So you say 10.
Yeah, 10.
That's a great guess. It's 9.
Man, that was
Yeah.
close. All right.
Dude, you're right there, right there. So that's just, I just wanted to paint that picture for everybody. Obviously, if you listen to this podcast, you love ball, you know ball. We're talking about Alabama and Indiana. You're talking about a storied program and a new kid on the block. So someone who's not supposed to be here, someone who, you know, expects to be here. And even if it's the Rose Bowl, Alabama knows their way around, you know. Kalen DeBoer, as a head coach, has been to the Rose Bowl more times than Indiana, you know, and he was a head coach at Indiana. There's a lot of fun things in this game. You mentioned the color contrast. That's going to be interesting to watch. Obviously, the coaching, where, you know, Kalen DeBoer, of course, coached at Kurt Cignetti coached at Alabama. So you've got some fun there. And then it's just fun that Indiana is the big dog. They're the favorite in this game over Alabama. You see that script A. It's weird to pick against them. I am certainly not going to do it. I'm picking Alabama in this game. I picked them in the bracket. I'm staying true to myself. After watching them in the first round, I felt almost validated in my assumptions. I was thinking Alabama could get up off the mat after getting ran over by Georgia in that SEC championship game. Ty Simpson did not look like himself in the first part of the game against Oklahoma. It kind of looked the same way. I got worried, but then you saw kind of an awakening. Some receivers, you know, just kind of emerged, and it kind of became, okay, you could be comfortable with Alabama and Kalen DeBoer again. They're still an extremely talented team. And yes, going into this game, it's a 6.5 point spread. Indiana is favored. I'm absolutely going to take those points. So that's all I have to do. But I'm going to tell you, Alabama's going to win this game outright. They've had exactly what they needed to, you know, get rid of the rust. They've played a lot of football because they had to play an extra game, and, you know, they lost and had to play in the first round on the road. So I think there's something to be said of their toughness. I think that's going to come out in this game. I'm really trying not to minimize Indiana. They've been phenomenal. This isn't like a Cinderella story that's coming to an end. This is going to be two juggernauts coming, you know, to do battle in the greatest venue we have in college football. It's just the championship pedigree of Alabama is going to be too much for Indiana for 4 quarters. I don't even have Alabama necessarily blowing them out. I have it as a tight win, but a win is a win. If they're within 6.5 points, I'm still taking this as a win myself, but Alabama wins outright. I'm going to stop talking and let you have some meat on this bone, Jacob.
I do want to mention real quick, as far as uniform matchups go, the first 2 games should be excellent. Depending on what Texas Tech wears, Oregon, just, you know, they've been really good with their road uniforms, so I'm not worried about that with Oregon. Texas Tech, I know they like to do the black, red, black. I'd love to do some black, black, white. Maybe some red would look good, but regardless, should be a good uniform matchup. But then Ohio State and Miami, I will say, I hope Ohio State brings back the home heritage striped jerseys. Daniel, I have a different take than I used to have. I think it's a better look than their regular home jersey, but I like that they save it for the playoff. My one change would be I don't love the black numbers on the shoulders. You have to look
Just
this up.
keep
Maybe I
it
can
white.
put it on screen here for us, but their heritage jerseys has that like gray stripe that they typically save for postseason play on the home jerseys. They wore the heritage away jerseys in the Natty last year, but I hope Ohio State wears those at home, and then Miami just wear the all white or green pants. Just don't do orange pants with the red. It won't look as good. Yeah, the Rose Bowl should be okay. It's the same color red, so not a lot of contrast there, but the Rose Bowl itself is going to look beautiful. Something you and I talked about, how the uniform matchup looks on the field is also important. Like the color of the grass and stuff. Everything looks good in the Rose Bowl. That grass is, again, that's why I compare it to Augusta
10
National.
out of 10.
10 out of 10. The field design's perfect. That's something we should do in the offseason, Daniel. I want to do a ranking of like fields, how good fields look.
Plus, you're talking about lighting, you know, in Norman and how it's a little darker and everything. Well, at Rose Bowl, the lighting's always perfect because it's, you know, picturesque.
Starting the day.
Afternoon. Yep. Exactly. So
I love it. All right. The Rose Bowl. Daniel, I walked away from Alabama's win over Oklahoma in prison of the moment. I texted our group chat and I said, not me thinking Alabama's going to beat Indiana here in a couple weeks. And I'm like, man, It is so hard for me to look past, depending on where you look, the first or second or third best roster in college football as far as the level of talent of their players.
Yeah.
They're in a playoff setting. This is what we always said is like when an 8 or a 9 seed wins it or a 10 seed wins it. Ohio State last year, it's going to be an Ohio State and Alabama, a Georgia that lost a couple games, got hot late, and they've got this roster that can go and beat anybody.
Right.
I don't think that's Alabama this year, but they at least fit that build. I'm laying the points with Indiana. I thought a lot about it. I walked away saying I'm at least going to take the points. I'm laying the points with Indiana. I'm trying to trust the performances that I've seen 2025 on the field. And Indiana has looked like the best team in the country in 2025. And if I'm taking the Oklahoma game into account for Alabama, my red flag is they gave up over 400 yards to an Oklahoma offense that had done nothing the second half of the season. And I know Mateer's thumb was better, but the way they were able to run the ball, and Alabama has struggled to run the ball all year, and they've struggled to stop the run all year. And they're going up against a very stout Indiana defense that shut down Ohio State and held them to, 10 points in the Big Ten championship?
Yeah. Yep.
And on the other side, they're going up against the number one pass offense in the country, number 6 offense, opponent adjusted for yards per play in the country. I think Indiana's going to win and cover here. I think that they've been the better team all season. I'm trying to just I've admitted it's hard for me to look at Indiana and trust it, but I'm trying to go with what I've seen in 2025 and trust it. Lay the points with Indiana. Give me Indiana to win and cover in the Rose Bowl. I like this game to be like 27 to like 17 ish. I don't know if Bama's going to be able to score enough to win. If they hold Indiana to 27, that'll be impressive because that's about what Oklahoma did, and Indiana's offense is a lot better. Give me Indiana to win and cover in the Rose Bowl, man. All right, that brings us to New Year's evening, not eve, but 8 p.m. New Year's Day. We go to the Sugar Bowl. I like the Sugar Bowl. I think it's a good venue there in New Orleans. We grew up SEC fans, so always tied to the Sugar Bowl being kind of the big bowl game for the SEC schools and Big 12 traditionally. Daniel, we get an SEC on SEC matchup in New Orleans. It's a rematch from earlier in the season. Georgia and Ole Miss, so we expected to be here when the bracket came out. We get it now. A Lane Kiffin-less Ole Miss. Georgia, 6.5 point favorite. This was 43-35 the first game. It's the first time around, Daniel. High scoring affair where the only stops came in the fourth quarter. Only a couple of punts in the game. High scoring. That means the spread's about where that game ended last time, about a touchdown in favor of Georgia. Who do you like to win and cover in the Sugar Bowl?
Because you mentioned that this is a SEC venue and there's 2 SEC teams, I just would like to know. I wanted to see how many times each of these teams has played. Obviously, your perception would be probably Georgia has played plenty more. Do you want to take a guess on either one?
I do think it's Georgia more. We go in number of appearances.
Yeah, number of appearances. Georgia is more. My initial thought was they probably had double the amount if I was guessing, but I did look it up and it was interesting.
Is it more than 10?
Both teams have more Georgia than 10.
Okay.
Which was surprising.
Is Georgia like 20?
No. It's Georgia's got 13. Ole Miss has got 11. So
wow, okay.
I saw Ole Miss with 11. I expected to see Georgia at 22. It's not something I've kept, close track of, but usually it's tied to winning SEC championships. I think Georgia has won, was it 17 SEC championships, something like that. But yep, that's the number. So 13 for Georgia, 11 for Ole Miss. Speaking of uniform matchups, this one's going to be interesting. I like, Georgia wearing the red. Ole Miss is probably wearing white, I would think. I don't think they're going to do a color, but I guess they technically could. No. But apparently the reason they chose the navy blue for the last game was because that was Lane Kiffin's least favorite, the word on the street at least, which I do like their navy blue look. I think it will look good.
Oh, it's a classic. It's classy.
But we're going to get essentially the same look that we got in Athens because Georgia was at home, of course. Rematches are always interesting because you want to glean what you had from the first game. This one's, take it a step up in that, one team doesn't have their head coach. Most of the time you would just chalk it up and say, okay, well, okay, Ole Miss doesn't have Lane Kiffin. This is easy. Georgia's going to win big. But, Lane Kiffin was not the sole play caller. Charlie Weiss Jr. did call the plays. You still have the defensive, pretty much both staffs completely in place. The difference is, of course, you don't have a staff solely focused on this. You've got staff, partially focused on this, partially recruiting for LSU because they've moved on. You also have the one thing I thought, especially in this matchup, because we talk about matchups specifically, the matchup with Ole Miss and Georgia, bring it down to the head coaches. You've got Lane Kiffin and Kirby Smart. They know each other so well. These guys are close friends back to their years at Bama, but they both have immense respect for one another. They are good friends. They have their text group that I'd love to be a part of, but I'd love to see, get a glimpse of what's going on in that Saban Tree text group that they have flaunted before. But these guys, because they know each other so well, it's almost that I think Lane gives an edge that can't necessarily be quantified in X's and O's. He knows Kirby well, and he knows what Kirby likes to do. He knows what Saban likes to do. And because of that, even if he didn't have the guys that could play with him, he knows kind of how their mind works. And you hear about the Kiffin whistle. You won't be hearing that in this game. That becomes famous where, he whistles to get his quarterback's attention to change something, or if he knows exactly what they're in or what they're going to do, he'll whistle so he can give, a note to the quarterback. That's not there. Because of that specifically, I feel better about Georgia. I don't want to just wash it all and say, oh, they don't have their head coach. I think Ole Miss is still an extremely formidable team. And I think specific matchups, I think they could win and advance in the playoffs. I just think that running into Georgia where they are and the way Georgia has played defensively since the Ole Miss game, Ole Miss was able to get all those yards on them. Now I think Georgia has found their footing. Glenn Schumann has gotten more exotic with the blitz scheme and better with disguising certain things, and not necessarily that he's become better. The players have gotten better over the course of the season. They've grown up. The Georgia defensive back, we've seen them just grow and become a strength of the team now, whereas early in the season they were a liability. So all of those things together, I think, are going to contribute to Georgia playing better defense in this game. I think Georgia, because of that, does not, maybe have the offensive game that they had against Ole Miss as well. I think they're probably a dialed down version of that. They've not been as electric offensively, but Georgia is a very complimentary football, very geared towards complimentary football. That's how Kirby wants to play things. I think that's how it's going to go. A 6.5 point spread. I think Georgia wins this comfortably. I don't think that it's a snoozer of a game. I think that, Ole Miss is in this game till the very end, but I think you probably see a 2 touchdown victory. Maybe something along the lines where Georgia is not ever in danger of necessarily losing lead in the second half, I'll say, where they've always at least got a touchdown lead and basically they're trading possessions. Maybe Georgia goes and scores, Ole Miss comes right back down. I could see that happening, but I think Georgia wins comfortably in that sense. So give me the dogs, lay the points.
Daniel, if we just copy and paste the first game, that's why the spread is where it is, right? We've seen this game. Georgia was able to get more stops than Ole Miss. I think, what's the same from the first game? I think the same is that both teams are going to be able to score. I think what's different is, I agree with you, both defenses have gotten better. I think Georgia's defense from the fourth quarter of this game on, Georgia's defense was different the rest of the year. And two, I think Chambliss is probably, this was his first road start.
Yeah.
Chambliss is a lot more comfortable in this offense. I think if there is energy behind the being Kiffinless and we're going to show him, I think that probably expires after the first quarter of this game. I think at home you get to beat up on Tulane. I think about the second quarter, it's going to be okay. That kind of wave is over with. The biggest difference
I also think that's
game,
possibly split, not to interrupt you. I think it's also possibly split because the coaches, all those offensive coaches are leaving too. So I don't think there can be a unified galvanization.
Right.
where I agree with you. If otherwise, I feel like it would be, hey, we're us against the world. Well, it's us against this team, this game, but all these guys are, 1 foot out the door. Sorry, you continue.
No, but to me, the difference in this game, Daniel, is Georgia outrushed Ole Miss in the last game, 221-88. They were still able to play their game even in a shootout, and I think that's the difference in this game. I think that Georgia, as bad as the defense was early on in the year, they committed to stopping the run, and they stopped every team from running the ball on them, and they've committed to running the ball, and that created a lot of balance with their offense that I don't think Ole Miss is going to be able to stop. Gunnar Stockton had his best game of the season in this game against Ole Miss. You could argue maybe the Texas game as well. He's been kind of off since the Georgia Tech game against, he was kind of off in the SEC championship too. He was efficient, but not as explosive as he was in this Ole Miss game. I do wonder if maybe facing the Ole Miss defense can give Gunnar Stockton some more confidence. I do think Georgia wins and covers, but I think the biggest difference in the game is that Georgia can stop the run and runs the ball at an elite clip, and it's why in the first matchup they held the ball for 37 minutes compared to Ole Miss's 22. So I think that's a big difference in this game. I think Georgia wins and covers. I didn't think Ole Miss scores some points. I think this could be like a 31-20 game, not as high scoring as the first time around, but Georgia's pass rush has come on where Chambliss was able to sit back and kind of toss it all over the place on the first 3 quarters against Georgia the first time. I do think that's a difference too, is the Georgia pass rush has come on where they're starting to get a lot of pressure rushing 4 guys. And then you get into 3rd and long and you start to get defensive play calls that Georgia was not doing early in the year. You start to get stemming up front. You start to get simulated pressure. You start to get 6 guys in the line. You don't know who's dropping back and who's going to where. And you start to get stunts in the defensive line. It's a lot of stuff Georgia was not doing early because they played a ton of young players. And I don't think the coaching staff trusted the players to execute that early in the year. They had to simplify it. Now I think you're getting a more exotic version of Georgia's defense. I don't know if Ole Miss is going to be able to keep up scoring with Georgia, even if Georgia's scoring is more limited too. So I think Georgia has more ways to win. I think they win and cover. It's 6.5 under a touchdown. Yeah, I like Georgia by about a touchdown in this game. I almost took the points because I do think Ole Miss is being overlooked a little bit, but I think you could also say is Georgia being overlooked a little bit as far as I'm not hearing a lot of conversation nationally about Georgia winning this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see interesting off the field stuff with Georgia having played in this game last year, lost the game obviously, but there was the terror attack in New Orleans last year. Kirby Smart lost his dad in New Orleans last year. I am curious if that has an effect, good or bad, on the team, if this is the Smart family's first time back in New Orleans since that all happened. But Kirby Smart talked about it in his press conference of just like, hey, we'll deal with that off the field. And by the time the game kicks off, he'll be so busy that it'll be focused on the game at that point. But something to keep an eye on and talk about.
Yeah, this moved the game last year. That was, it's
by
one of those things that's a whole day. So, that changed kind of the essence of it. And, you talked about coaches that are returning to their spot. This Georgia is the only one that's returning to the hosting position in this spot. So they're, if you want to say used to it or have a beat on it. And then of course, Gunnar Stockton is the only returning quarterback to, who has started a playoff game. So something else to kind of just keep in your back pocket as you go to the second round where all these teams are getting more and more, these games get more and more competitive.
So uniforms, Daniel, almost don't mess this up. This is very easy. They asked their fans to wear powder blue, so I'm assuming they're wearing a powder blue helmet. Powder helmet, white jersey, gray pants. Don't mess it up. Very easy, very easy. Elite uniform matchup if we do that. Daniel, if there's a game we picked that you're least confident in your pick, which one is it?
I would say my least confident pick is Oregon and Texas Tech, just because I feel like, of course, it's just a 1.5 point spread, but I think it's one of those things there's not a lot of data of common opponents that I could look at and be like, oh, look, this points to, of course, because the associative property always works by being like, oh yeah, because of this will happen. But at least just getting a look. So I really feel like it's going to be eye-opening when we see those two teams come out.
Mine would be the Rose Bowl. And I'll say this point because I was thinking about it with Georgia in that, not that it won't be done, but it's hard for me to trust a team that's never been in the spot to all of a sudden go and do it. And Indiana has the playoff experience last year, but like I think about Ole Miss in this game. This is the biggest game Ole Miss has played in since, ever?
Last week. Yeah.
Since last week. And that's at home. And now you go face a Georgia team where this is what Kirby Smart's like 5th playoff appearance. They've been in a New Year's Six Bowl every year since Kirby's second year at the program. This is 9 years in a row. So I think you've got a lot of experience. And I think that's why about Indiana and Alabama. Alabama's played in these games. I mean, even I know it's a new staff, but Kalen DeBoer played for a national championship. He won a playoff game at Washington. So the staff's used to it. The players are used to it that are on the roster. So that would be my answer is the Rose Bowl. I do wonder, it's hard to quantify that as far as like what it feels like when, I know it's fun to talk about, but now your season is actually on the line. It really is win or go home. You've got these special patches on the jersey. You've got a 50-50 crowd split. It's just interesting. It's hard to forget. It's easy to forget that these are 18 to 22-year-olds. And this is what made what Saban did so special. And a lot of these historically great coaches is, especially in this, social media world, is keeping these players motivated. It's really impressive. That's why I think he's the GOAT. And again, it's just something that in the back of my mind as I'm watching this is like, how do you get this 18-year-old to lock in when they haven't been here before? Something to keep an eye on. I think it's fun to think about. Be sure to follow the podcast. You can actually check out the podcast, theextrapointpod.com, which is live. So check it out there. If you want to join our bracket group, there's a link in the bio down below to do that, or you can search the Extra Point on ESPN. It's open. So if you have a bracket that you've already made, you can join. You can't make a new one. But if you already have a bracket you made, you can join the group. I might be doing a prize for the winner. 12 people still tied for first. So excited to do that. You can follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.